My name's Ian Allison, and I cover enterprise blockchain for CoinDesk. And we got a great panel of battle-hardened enterprise blockchainers here today. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and talk a bit about the consortium. You start, Brian.
Sure. It's battle-hardened to waste and gold. I just want to put that on the table. Hi, Brian Bellendorf, Executive Director of Hyperledger, which is a part of the Linux Foundation, which has been doing this consortium thing for about 18 years now.
Sebastiano, I'm French. I work for Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance, and I'm chairman of the Vehicle Identity Work Group in the MOBI consortium. We'll speak a bit of that after.
Hi, Susan. Is this on? Yep. Susan Joseph, formerly the North American representative for B3I, which is the Global Insurance and Reinsurance Consortium for blockchain, now consulting.
Ajit Tripathi, partner in financial services at Consensus, formerly UK. I built the UK blockchain business for PricewaterhouseCoopers, had an opportunity to work on v.trade. Increasingly, I'm starting to see more and more capital markets plays involving Consortia, and last year we delivered Comgo, which is a major trade finance consortium.
Great stuff. So I just wanted to, it's such a sort of expansive subject this has become. I wanted to just start with a kind of little bit of taxonomy, which Brian has to take credit for, which is that we're really talking about three types of consortia. And one is a technology thing, which maybe Hyperledger is an example of that. Then you've got what is like a standards-focused group, which the EEA, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, would be a good example of that. And then you've got very kind of narrowed vertical-focused stuff. So we.trade was on earlier. The B3I thing that you're involved in, Susan, is another example. And yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe a good way to think about this space. What do you think, Brian?
Well, if you look under your chairs, what you'll find is a consortia. You get a consortia. You get a consortia. This is technology for running consortia, right? And the open source community has been working together as kind of peer production-oriented teams for 25 years. I think in technology we've kind of figured out how to put aside, how to go and compete with each other viciously in some ways, and then when there's stuff that is just table stakes for getting done in our industry, working together on them. And so it kind of doesn't surprise me to see that the software itself has engendered so many different people to get together and build consortia to go and solve some of these basic problems. I think the ones that are least well understood, I mean, we understand how to pull together communities and developers to build code. We understand, I think, how to build standards consortia. Those perhaps even predate open source, ISO and IEEE, those sorts of things. But it's these governance kind of consortia that I think are a new type of organization. And especially if they are about kind of being a gateway and setting the ground rules and the governance mechanisms for actual production blockchain systems in the enterprise space. Suddenly you have this strange mix of technology and politics and diplomacy and legal terms, things that perhaps we don't have a lot of experience with yet. So that's going to take some time, I think, to sort itself out.
I mean, I was going to say that the place to start is governance, and I was thinking about, for example, if you're the biggest global shipping carrier on the planet, and you decide you want to do a blockchain, and there's a choice you've got. You get all your lawyers and a bunch of people around a table and talk about it for a long time, or you just get out and innovate. And this is what kind of IBM did with Maersk and TradeLens, and not to take anything away from that excellent project, but there was a governance. They made a governance faux pas, right? So I don't know, the panel, I don't want to say what's bad about governance, what's good, but what are your learnings about governance? Maybe you want to go, Sebastian?
Yeah, so I represent MOBI. MOBI is a consortium of car manufacturers that sit together to create standards on the blockchain technology. So the car industry is one of the, let's say, most competitive industry in the world. The number of brands, the number of models is like crazy for an industry. And we're not the kind of industry that sits together. But we have to with blockchain. It's like we don't have the choice. And the credits go to Chris Ballinger, the founder of MOBI. He realized quickly that every car manufacturer was doing work on the blockchain. And typically, the prime example is this digital passport for your car when you have a proof of maintenance, immutable records of your car, whatever, odometer. And every one of them was doing that. And the car industry, I mean, cars are very, we could say, liquid objects, so they're being traded. When you buy a car, you sell it to another guy, or you can even sell it to another brand. It makes you a good deal, so you buy the new car. So if there's no compatibility, then it won't work. So this was the core idea. So Mobi was created to solve this problem, building standards for an industry, so not for technology, and work together.
Susan, governance?
Yep, so governance. So governance is, I think it's the make or break of whether or not.
You called it a people problem, which I think is a good way to say it.
Yeah, so I said it when we were prepping this call, I said, you know, the technology is hard, people are harder. It is really a social question of how you're going to organize yourselves. You know, you're looking at technology that takes out trust and puts it in something that's relatively objective. And then you're looking at putting a bunch of competitors together, and you got to trust them, only you never did before. I mean, that is part of I think the major problem with this. I know when the insurers came together to first form B3I, back before it was an initiative, it actually wasn't that the technology came first. That was the insurers were getting together anyway, and they were trying to figure out what problems to solve. And then the technology was added on. So it's always a people governance, how do we allocate?
Yeah, and one of the things we did right with Comgo, and my colleague Manu Marshall is in the audience, he can tell you more about it, is that Comgo, and it's, first of all, as a technology vendor, we aligned our incentives with Comgo, right? So you don't want to be in a situation where the technology partner is best interest is in billing you as much as possible. You want them to be a part of the consortium so that they're actually helping you win, right, and execute at high speed. The second part is that Comgo is structured, and that's not our contribution, that's the contribution of the founders, as an open platform, right? So first of all, it's structured as a company, as in it's a for-profit company that has every incentive to make a success out of their venture. It isn't a bunch of banks sitting around the table with coffee and cookies. There is a clear commercial imperative for everybody. And the third part is that it's an open platform. You know, you can join, you can leave. It's not a consortium, so you get past a whole bunch of legal and competition law type of issues, and you move as fast as possible, right? And so speed of time to go to market comes from governance, but these problems are not new to blockchain. You know, there was a PwC consortium to do KYC using a central database, and there are certain solutions I wish we had applied that I think the Comgo founders have been able to do.
I mean, Brian, you're maybe like the kind of chief cat herder of them all. I mean, what have you found what have you learned? What's not worked and what's worked, do you think?
Well, one thing that works in open source communities writ large is something that I guess sometimes is considered a travesty when it actually does happen, but the fact that it can is a really important thing, which is the right to fork. The right for us to come together as a project, work on code, and if we have some disagreement, if that's a failure, it might be by technology, but more often by personality or by leadership or whatever, we can go our separate ways and we don't have to throw away this asset that we've built, right? It's obviously very different in blockchain networks, but there's still something similar there, which is when blockchain communities have forked to recover, sometimes that does mean some part of that community has broken away, but those two independent shards are able to continue to keep going, right? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, provides an effective check on tyranny, an effective check on the governance of an organization. It means you can't be too out there and dictatorial. You can't compel your members to do things they don't want to do or disagree with doing because they haven't been held subject to the same, what is it, Ashley, it's the holdup problem, right? The sunk cost, thank you. The sunk cost of like your investment into that now becomes a binding kind of force that keeps you trapped and subject to where everyone else wants it to go. No, in an open source community, you've built this common IP and you can walk away. And if you've got a stronger case to bring the rest of the community with you, you're the new leader, right? So what keeps us honest inside of Hyperledger is we have to be kind of leaders who lead from behind. We have to, I mean, at the very least, when it comes to Hyperledger's staff, we have to be about facilitating, about providing channels, about providing guidance. But you know, if we open a door and no one walks through it, you know, it's kind of it's no one's fault. It's just, we have to figure out the right way to kind of optimize for the talent and interest who shows up, right? But it also means we don't really have the leverage that perhaps other networks have. Be interesting to see if that translates to the governance types of organizations you would see around a network like Comgo or Maersk or others, right? Is there in those networks that in the long term a right to fork, a right to break away if the governance of that organization goes awry, or governance of that network goes awry?
Super interesting. I hear that Maersk and TradeLens has actually been fixed, for the record. Whatever was wrong with it, it's been sorted. But I suppose just step back for a moment, and I wanted to say, this isn't kind of, a silly question, but when I write about this stuff sometimes, enterprise blockchain's not the sexiest part of crypto, and people sometimes just troll me and say, hey, that's a database upgrade that you're talking about. That's nothing. There's no innovation there at all. But I defend this area, and I like to say that, well, look, there is something novel here. There is people getting around a table in a way that they maybe didn't before. Now, I don't know, I mean, Susan, you weren't so sure if this has been going on a long time, but I just wondered if there's anything novel, totally novel, you think, then what if you could put your finger on that, maybe start with Ajit, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so, I have a colleague, John Wolpert, who, Brian, you're well aware of, and we've been arguing for now 6 months about whether enterprise should be using private blockchains or public blockchains, and it turns out the answer is both. Right? So what's happening more and more is that with Consortia, we are creating these shared operating models. As Brian said, can you do some of this without blockchain? Maybe, right? But we've tried this before. We've tried this with web services. We tried this with BPM. We tried this with ESP type solutions. And finally, we have a really great database for multiple parties to build a distributed system where they can essentially create complex workflows, business processes that involve more than one entity, using a shared database that has a cryptographically proven record of who did what at when. So that's powerful, right? Now what happens when, let's say, I join one consortium for, let's say I join VTrade, now I join Congo, now I join Marco Polo and Voltron, now what, right? How many of these am I going to deal with? So at some point, the only way for these islands of value to connect, and the term is islands of value, to connect is the public blockchain. So you essentially want to be able to connect these consortia or islands of value, let's say a trade system with a financing system, which is kind of the case with VACT and Comgo. So VACT is an energy trading system, Comgo is a finance system, and these two things interoperate using what we call the broker protocol, right? In the long run, it's the public blockchain that's going to be this magic bus, as John Wolpert calls it, that will connect all of these islands of value and allow them to interact transactionally and essentially avoid this fragmentation problem.
I really like John Wolpert's mainnet message bus theory. Everyone should get familiar with that.
It's not either or, it's both.
Depends on which tokens you hold, I guess, which mainnet you think will become the one, right?
It's got to be Ethereum, right? Susan, what do you think? I mean, we were talking about this earlier. There's disclaimer. What do you see as kind of novel? We were talking about this earlier. You're saying financial utilities and consortia have been going around for a while. So what's new? What do you think is new?
So I think what's new and what's probably difficult about this industry is that it's innovation emerging. And so companies, when I was inside an insurer, I was putting together use cases for them, they would ask me, so who do we play with? And that is kind of what it comes down to, right? You're dealing with a network technology, and you need to set up networks to start. And so the consortia here are different, not because they set up networks, but because they set up networks with some emerging technology that they're trying to use to solve a problem, and the technology itself is networked. And so that's what makes it, I think, different in this instance. And it also makes it sort of a natural fit for consortia to grow on this and give the industry a pretty interesting voice on figuring out risk and exploration and people to do things with. I think it's a community building exercise, but it's a very, I think it fits here.
So I wish to be provocative and argumentative for a second, right? And
Absolutely.
I've seen
I'm a lawyer, it's okay.
Here we
No
go.
problem.
So I've seen consortia organized in a way that they can make any technology work, and then I've seen consortia organized in a way that they keep switching and nothing ever moves forward, right? So you're right when you said governance is a key point. I mean, alignment of incentives, that was my point. The governance structure, absolutely, the legal structure, all of those things come in, right? And they are way more important than technology. And in blockchain, we talk about crypto economic incentives. I think we should apply some of the same ideas to our consortia and say, why is any of the parties in this consortium actually in this business? What's the upside for them, and how quickly do they want to go to market? And the sooner we can stop exploring and start building real businesses on this technology, like Comgo, VACT, even VTrade, and some of the others coming in, I think we'll be better off. We have to go beyond experiments and build real businesses using this tech.
I would agree. I mean, I don't believe that consortia, and jump in, I mean, I don't mean to dominate. Consortia, POCs are good initially, right? People have to learn.
That was 2 years ago, yeah.
It isn't, though, across some of these industries. Some of these industries move slower than others, and you need to give them a chance to learn. I mean,
Sure.
You have to educate. This is a great spot to educate. And it's also, some industries don't necessarily have standards that will work on this type of technology or that may have to be adapted. And this is a good arena for them to be in, to discuss that and think things through. So,
For sure.
yes, I would love to see products on this. We all would love to see it get going, but it's a learning curve, and I think you have to sort of be gentle with the fact that companies are trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can
We are
chime
working
in.
with them.
Stuff. And Sebastian, I was going back to this sort of taxonomy that outlined at the beginning. We thought Mobi was maybe like a fourth type, a mixture of all of the above, and maybe talk about what's kind of novel and exciting about that.
Yeah, I'm going to give the point of view of one of the cats that's like in the herding cats, because I'm not managing Mobi, I'm participating. So Mobi is interesting because it's not driven by technology. It's sort of driven by a vertical, but also with this like will to create standards. And I think it resonates well with everything what's said. So first, the car industry is very specific compared to software, because to build a car, you need something like 5 to 7 years from the first design to the cars rolling out in production. You can do shorter, you can do different, but it's roughly ballpark. So the learning curve for us is really important, because for 100 years, we've built binding products that are supposed not only to transport you, but to protect you as well. I mean, when the car crashes, when your software crashes, it crashes. When the car crashes, it crashes. It's different, but and so we are fundamentally into value protection, and we need to change our point of view to go into value protection, value creation. So that's a different exercise for the consortium. Where Mobi is interesting is that. From the roots, it's built with this idea of like the OEMs, the car manufacturers are going to sort of keep the decision, get the decision. So we're not technology driven, we're not protocol driven, we're driven by the business, which poses some kind of challenge, which is like we're all adversarial, to speak in blockchain terms. So how do we all agree that it's the right thing? I believe it belongs to the people that you put in the consortium to represent your brands. Mobi is historically based in the Silicon Valley, from the innovation labs, with like this idea of being more open-minded of what we can do all in all. And so with this like layer of car manufacturers, then you build like other layers. We have IBM Hyperledger.
Well, one of the things I think is pretty interesting about Mobi is that, like as you say, the OEMs and car makers are kind of in competition, but they want to get in a blockchain, and they want to cooperate and share data and stuff. But there's also a pressing need to join that blockchain, because you've got Waymo and Uber doing self-driving cars, and they've got more miles than you guys. So if you guys can find a way to, multi-compute somehow with your data, you can catch up with those guys, and you've got to do it. And if you talk to them, Waymo, I mean, they don't talk to you, but they're arrogant. So, that seems to me to be a use case right there that's very, this is the thing, it's how driven are you to join your consortia, so like Food Trust, lettuces being recalled is a very pressing kind of use case. I don't know where I'm going with that, but you get the drift. I think one thing that you said that was interesting, Brian, was this idea that consortia like these startups that also have characteristics where you can get like free riders, and then that's a problem. And kind of funding almost as a way is a problem. ICO standards cost money and stuff like that. That seemed like an interesting point.
Are you interested in the funding question?
Yeah, that kind of. Yes.
Like how should consortia be funded in their operations?
Yeah, I mean, should they per transaction or something? You know, can you do it like that or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of flexibility out there. Again, just kind of, I guess we could each speak about the different organizations and how they're funded. But we're funded by membership fees. We have 275 members, about 50 of whom are nonprofits, government agencies, and central banks who don't pay any fees, but the other 225 help fund a pretty lean operation. I've got a staff of 9 who go and focus on helping those members get value out of their membership. The other half focus on organizing the developer community. It's not a large budget by the standards of ICOs that are out there. It's larger than a typical A round series. So, you know, it's enough to be able to have an impact, but we couldn't afford to start writing any of the lines of code if we were, because it would be a slippery slope to having to have hundreds of devs to try to, you know, meaningfully complement the volunteer development out there. So really our role is as air traffic control on those sorts of things. And frankly, somebody pays the same price to be a member, whether they are heavily using this technology or not using it at all. And most importantly, no one has to be a member of Hyperledger to use the code or to even participate in the technical community. Our credibility as a technical organization would be basically shot if the only people who could participate are the ones who were members of Hyperledger, who could afford to pay. We have quite a few very active companies participating who are not actually members of Hyperledger. They only contribute code, and we're incredibly grateful for that. I think it's always appropriate to ask what's the funding model for any of these organizations? Are you primarily just a promotional kind of thing, or are you actually trying to get done, and where do your incentives lie as a consortium? Being clear about to the public with that, as well as obviously your own members, is really important.
Yeah, and do you guys have comments on that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we are, founding members of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Now we're also founding members of GDF, which is the Global Digital Assets team. We have, we contributed to Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Now Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is contributing to the Token Taxonomy Initiative and a bunch of these. So eventually these, an EA is currently set up as a standards body, so anybody can essentially implement the Enterprise Ethereum standard. Right, we are going to implement that, and other people, it's open to everyone, right? And we set it up, EA was set up in a way that everyone can join. The joining fee was the lowest for just about any technology standards body ever. The way, I think there are networks effects in consortia. There is also competition between consortia. So at some point, we should see consortia as, entities that are going to compete for standards in this emerging Internet of Value. And there is a premium for execution, so for getting things done, whether it's enterprise consortia to deliver value or to create communities or standards. At the end of the day, I think some of the lean principles and agility that applies to startups also applies to consortia. If you're trying to do too much and get everyone in the same room without a clear purpose, and there is no MVP, right, there is no way to show success, then it's not going to work. So you got to show success, right? So some of the lean techniques work for consortia just as well.
So one of my premises is that consortia do not realize that they're actually startups. You come together and you have all of these major branding players with you. And a lot of times the people who are participating in any of the consortia, be it for-profit or not-for-profit, come from big brands. And they bring that sort of big brand mentality with them. Yet they're developing this separate business. A consortia is a business.
Absolutely.
So exactly to your point about the leanness, and the funding matters, and time to market matters, and you're developing your own brand as a consortia too. And I think that's pretty critical. So that goes to governance, coming in and coming out. What happens if you want to leave a consortia? I haven't seen a lot of literature on that. But as a startup,
Brian is smiling.
But because in the verticals ones, there is...
That would be that big risk.
Right, it is a big question. But to your point as well, when I was involved with the insurance consortia, the first people that showed up to talk to me were Moby. So it was really interesting to me that one consortia and another consortia, both doing startup stuff, are starting to talk about standards and things that really matter across industries. And it's an augmented voice for every participant then.
I mean, just Mobi is fee funded the same way. I think what's interesting in Mobi is we have a structure with different work groups. We're a very small consortium. We have 85% of the OEMs when we think in production volume. So we're big, but not a ton of members, not like Hyperledger. So we're structured in work groups, and I'm chairing the vehicle identity work groups. And it was mentioned that, yeah, we need to deliver. That's the hard part because it's a side job for one of the cats. But we get some help, but we're happy to say that in the following weeks, hopefully not months, we'll be issuing the first draft for the vehicle identity standard. So how to manage vehicle identity using blockchain technology, which is something, for the record, quite complicated because the car industry is very centralized. You have like registration offices, you have insurances, those are central stuff. So how do we add some decentralization in all this without disrupting everything was the real challenge.
This point you raised there, Susan, about the consortia kind of talking to each other is super interesting. It reminds me that what I think is really interesting is how yourselves and one of the other consortia that's focused on that insurance vertical, you seem to have migrated to Corda, the R3 blockchain together or around the same time, which seems to me to make a lot of kind of sense. And I just wondered if that was any kind of a conscious sort of decision, you know, to
not from
interoperate.
So not necessarily from a pure consortia standpoint, but insurers and reinsurers interact all the time, and it makes sense. So, you know, there were more reinsurers in one of the consortia than others, but reinsurers are in both. And that conversation just happened throughout the industry about what made sense given their business problems, what kind of software did they want to use. And you know, you are right that the constant question at the beginning was, well, how is this going to interoperate? You can't, if you're going to sell off insurance to reinsurers, you've got to be on something that works together. It doesn't mean, though, and I want to point this out, is that because you've picked one solution right now, that doesn't mean in 3 years from now that that's going to be your same solution.
Sure.
It just means, you know, and it's a good solution for now, and it may be the great solution for the future, but you're not dead set in it because the technology is emerging.
Yeah, at some point you will have insurers connecting to corporates who are on Ethereum and individuals who are using Ethereum.
Exactly.
So you're going to switch to Ethereum, right?
I mean, I think of it in terms of...
Not up to me.
Sorry, you were going to
No, I
say
was just going to add, there's very few companies that have started getting into blockchain technology that I think just stick with one platform. For evidence of that, look at the Forbes Blockchain 50. After each company, it shows you the platforms they use. And there's very few that are only one. I don't think anyone is only Corda, too. I think anybody using Corda is also using things for ledger needs, because Corda is more just about messaging, right?
So you're absolutely right with that, and every large insurer that I know who is experimenting with this is experimenting with more than one platform. And honestly, I mean, this is where you are in the technology cycle. This is what you should be doing.
It's also the nature of this. It's not Mac versus PC. It's not beta VHS. Right. This is a more heterogeneous kind of problem space.
Different computing paradigms interconnecting.
I mean, I just think of it journalistically in terms of the insurance industry being more advanced than the banking people. You talk to the banking people, their heads are always down. They're like, oh, they'll talk to me later. The insurers are like, yeah, we're up for this. You know, they're warming up. Anyway, I notice we're over time. What great sports. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much.